than they used to be.
Yeah.
But, really enjoyed the space, and, enough that when I sold the company, I ended up, instead of retiring, I ended up, starting a brewery up in Connecticut. So kind of a fun story.
So my usual follow-up question is, what was your gateway craft beer? But you kind of already mentioned some of the breweries in Vermont, and like you said, in the 80s, that wasn't, craft beer wasn't really even a term. So what was it about those beers that you were just like, oh, I think I could do this also?
I just liked the flavor. I loved the space they were in. It was cool. And, you got guys like Al Newman. You had Magic Hat. I mean, they were kind of out there, to be honest with you. Not that I am, but it was just a fun group of people that were brewing beer. And, at that point, I wasn't thinking about economics or anything else. Just it was fun. And actually, it was my wife that bought my first bona fide kit. I mean, most of my stuff was handmade. I had a 10-gallon pot. Who was to know that 5.5 gallons was going to be the norm 20 years later? So all of my stuff, in fact, I still have it. It's kind of fun. I mean, I had a step ladder for transferring beer, so based on gravity. I put my mash on the top stool and have it go down to the bottom. So very primitive. But I always liked the space. I always liked the people. And then, when I sold the company, really started thinking about getting into it. I spent some time in Portland, Maine, Portland, Oregon, Asheville, North Carolina. Went to the places where you could see a lot of breweries at the same time and really asked a lot of questions. My two main questions are what keeps you up at night, and if you had it to do over again, what would you do? Amazing the amount of notes I got on those two questions.
Oh, of course.
But I will say, when I traveled around and into other spots as well, I can't even begin to tell you how friendly the community was and the open arms. And I ask a question, and they tell you the answer without, sugarcoating it, without holding any proprietorship stuff back, no confidentiality. I mean, it was just a really great meetings. Spend as long as you want. Obviously you'd be doing a tour with a beer in your hand, right off the line. So, I mean, pretty cool stuff. Yeah. And came back, and in 2012, we started the Charter Oak Brewing Company. I actually started it, I don't know what the proper terminology is. It's not contract. I looked for somebody that would actually allow me to brew on their equipment. So I would go up with my grain, my hops, my yeast, basically buy their water, their steam, and rent their equipment. And it got me off the ground. I mean, it got me to scale recipes that I had from the home brewing days, proof of concept, confirmed distribution, contracts with hops, trademarks, business plans, that kind of stuff for the first couple of years. In fact, we started in 2012. We were the 9th brewery in Connecticut, and now there's 122. And in Connecticut, we're all within 10 miles of one another. So it's kind of fun. Just the way we're not strategically located, but the way that we're located, you're never more than 10 miles away from a brewery. So it's kind of a cool state for being kind of a smaller state.
I did not know that the depth of how many breweries are up there.
Yeah, we got 100, pretty steady, 122. Somebody decides they don't want to do it anymore. Somebody else, another operator comes in and buys the equipment or buys the spot and kind of turnkeys it. So it's been a pretty steady 122 for the last couple of years. Even during COVID, we didn't lose anybody really. But I had some transition on ownership, but didn't really lose any breweries up here. So kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask how the brewery scene up there is, but I mean, if you got 122, that's amazing.
Yeah, I tell you, the tap rooms are all, you talked about it earlier, on fire. I mean, on a weekend here, we're just jamming. We have a little bit of a different branding here. We have live music. We have cornhole every Thursday, so they take the place over. And the public's invited, obviously. But every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we have live music. And it's free. So we get a really, really good drawing. We have about a half a dozen, maybe it's closer to 8 food trucks on rotation, all making absolutely terrific and delicious and reasonably priced food. And then we have 10 beers on draft, and they're constantly rotating. We've got about 240 recipes. We always have some malt forward, hop forward, pilsners, sours, wheats. There's something for everybody out there. But they love it. It's always changing. Very fresh beers.
Now, you mentioned you sold a business to start it. What business was that you sold to start?
I had a bunch of different businesses. I started all in the pulp and paper industry, most in distribution. And, we always used to kind of joke, somebody dopier than me would knock on the door and want to buy it, and I'd sell it and start another one. So we actually I had 6 different companies before we started Charter Oak, but none in the beverage, none in the alcohol world, none in the packaging world. They were all paper. And then the last one I had was paper.com. And that's when basically, I don't know, the last time anybody, writing letters, reading newspapers and magazines, ordering out of a catalog, those are our markets. They're just dead. I mean, they're not alive, I'll put it that way. So always learned in school, you need to change before you have to change. So you got decisions you can make. And somebody offered to buy paper.com. We ended up selling it. I'm just not one to, read books on a beach. I love starting stuff, love the industry, and it was my wife that said, you're nuts, man. Why don't you get into the paper or the beer industry? So I went to a lot of the folks that I knew in the industries, primarily up in Vermont, and they said, you know what you're talking about. You talk the talk, you walk the walk. You'd be nuts not to get into it. So all of a sudden I was in the industry. So and having a ball. I mean, it's just we have just a terrific beer community in the tri-state area. I mean, everybody helps each other out. We have strong guilds that get together, and just really terrific customer base. It's really, really, really just been a fun experience for me and rewarding. So good to see.
You went from Dunder Mifflin to Brew Dogs.
I've heard that before too. Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly it. And really happy I made the decision. Like I said, it's fun going to work every day, and I'm literally here 7 days a week. Working the tap room. People really, my wife is involved as well. And I think people they're very appreciative of the fact that, I'm in the brewery during the week and I'm in the tap room during the weekends and real hands-on, which is pretty typical of the industry, typical of craft. But I'm here literally every day. And I'll be here tonight till, maybe 9 o'clock tonight, till the last hose is picked up and the floors are squeegeed. I'll be here, even in the snow. We're getting a snowstorm today up north.
Very nice. Yeah, so we here in Texas, of course, everything shut down yesterday because we had less than an inch of snow. So now today the high's in the 30, and people, some schools are not in because of that, and then they'll be going back tomorrow because the high will be in the 50s. So
Oh my God. No. Yeah. Sounds like New England. If you don't like the weather, wait a minute.
True. Yeah, same here. I mean, if you don't like the weather, wait about 15 minutes and then you'll be fine.
That's it. But I've enjoyed the industry. I've enjoyed, starting this company from scratch and building it. We're a little unique here. We have 2 brew houses under one roof. I've got a 20 barrel. It'll produce, they're all kind of oversized. That'll produce about 720 gallons of beer. We put that into fermentation tanks that hold about 1,600 gallons. So, you brew a couple of times to fill them. And then we have a small system here. We have a 5-barrel system, really about 7-barrel nominally. And that one is just a fun, hands-on system. We do all of our I don't want to say experimental, but the newer beers, the stuff that we're just starting up on, go through that. That's still about 220 gallons of beer every time we brew. So it's enough to do some damage. But it's fun. So people really enjoy it. There's hardly a style that we haven't produced here on site. Anything between a sour and lagers and stouts and wheats and, like I said, malt forward, hop forward. We did a roast beer. We did that with smoked grain. We just recently did a spruce tip beer. We literally took spruce tips and put them in the boil. So we do a lot of zany things. Our seasonal was it was a beer with about 9 pounds of vanilla from Madagascar, about a pound of cinnamon, and about a pound of nutmeg. So kind of goofy things that actually turn out pretty well. I mean, that seasonal that I just mentioned was the holiday beer. It was late, and because we had a bunch of issues with sourcing and that kind of thing. But I didn't tap the first keg until the 22nd of December, and I don't think I'll have enough to get through this weekend. It'll be done.
Really?
Yeah, and it all stayed here. Nothing went into distribution. That exceeded expectations, but that's not a normal story, but that exceeded expectations. It was delicious.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was delicious. Not an in-your-face vanilla shake, it was very mild, very flavorful, very aromatic. And people once they had the first one, they were drinking it all night long. It was kind of fun. It was a dark beer too, which is kind of unique. It was, I used a porter as a base, a light porter as a base. So it was fun. Spruce Tip took a little bit longer. That was kind of a unique beer. It smelled like you were in a forest, but it went. All the beers go. All the beers go. So we have as I said, we have a rotating board, so rotating taps, and then we also, most of our beer, quite frankly, goes into distribution. So we have distributors that pick up beer and sell it to restaurants and bars and retail stores and that kind of thing.
Very nice. Now, you mentioned that you've been, like you said, you were brewing since the 80s. How many of your original recipes are you still using?
I would say, ironically, since the 90s, because they've all been kind of tweaked, more than tweaked, severely modified with modern hops and yeast and everything else. But I would say most of our beers are based in one way, shape, or form on a lot of those. So out of the 240, I bet you 200 of them were. I mean, I was brewing beer all the time. I would say maybe it might be approaching 200, or at least based on the home. So I would take, my 10-gallon recipe and ramp it up, and I would do that in the small system, make a few batches, see if it made any sense, and then they'd migrate over to the big system. That's a pretty typical way of doing it. And then we have a big cask condition program here. So that's where it all kind of starts. If we're going to use a different hop or a different type of yeast or do something very different, it'll start in a cask. And then we'll put the cask on the bar. Cask is, it's a pint, 5.4 gallons. We'll do a couple of those and get a feel for what people like and what they don't like. Tweak it, and then we'll put it on the small system. Then if it does well, it goes on the big system.
Wow. Now, do you try to follow trends, or you kind of just make beer that you want other people to enjoy, but is it more leaning toward your palate or kind of what the trends are going up?
Neither. It's, I like the Spruce Tip. I'd heard of a Spruce Tip. It's a bigger beer in the Pacific Northwest. I'd never done one before, so I had more curiosity. Got that one going. The seasonal, the one I mentioned with the vanilla and the cinnamon and the nutmeg, that was my wife's idea. She's a big baker. So I'll try anything. I have 6 kids. When they get married, I'll ask them for their wedding ale. I'll brew a wedding ale. And I'll ask them, do you want a lager? Do you want an ale? What ABV? What alcohol do you want? Do you want it bitter? Do you want it smooth? Do you want it what aromatic characteristic? What